Hi everyone, Fox is here and I'm bringing back my weekly wrap-ups. It's been a while since I've done one of these videos, and the reason is just because I wasn't really reading that much at the beginning of this year. I read just a couple of books in January, listened to one audiobook. I didn't really read anything in February, but thankfully, things are turning for better in March. This is going to be the wrap-up for the period between March 5th and March 11th, so it's Sunday to Saturday. I used to make wrap-up videos for the week Monday to Sunday, but since I'm filming this on Sunday and I'm going to continue filming these videos on Sundays, it's just easier for me to basically take into account books for the period between Sunday to Saturday. So basically, the week will start on Sunday. Sorry I'm making this confusing, but let's get on with it. For this past week, I read a couple of plays and one novella, and also finished listening to one audiobook, so I have quite a lot to share with you. And the first thing that I have here is Pontypool by Tony Burgess. Tony Burgess is a Canadian playwright, and I honestly had not heard anything about him before I picked up the play at Indigo. I was just attracted to the cover. It reminded me of Welcome to Night Vale, and I was not disappointed because this is a story set in a small rural town of Ontario. Everything that happens there is set in a radio show booth, and basically some sort of apocalypse starts happening outside, and there is a spread of a very contagious disease. People are turning into zombie-like creatures, and yeah, and there is a host of a radio show in the midst of all of it. It is a very short, extremely short script. It was originally written as the script for a radio show, then it was turned into a script for a play and even staged, and it was also supposed to be a movie at some point. There is also a book with pretty much the same storyline as part of the trilogy by the same author, so it's all a bit confusing, I know. I really enjoyed the story. If you listen to Welcome to Night Vale, you'll probably enjoy this one as well. It is full of weird jokes, weird stuff happening, weird lines, and just like nothing makes sense at some point. There is also a bit of horror, gore, murder, blood, Jesus, like everything. The only thing that and I'm not going to mention it because it is a spoiler, is the way this disease is spreading, which is a very interesting concept. Never heard of it before, and I loved it. I gave this play 4.5 stars. I have a full written review of this play on my blog, and I just excited that I picked it up. However, I personally think that paying $18 for like a 60-page book is a bit too much. But yeah. However, I think this book would have been amazing as a radio show. I'm a bit sad that it was not made into a radio show, because it would have been amazing, and there are all of those sound effects, and that would have been just awesome. So yeah, if you're a fan of Welcome to Night Vale, check this one out. Next, I finally finished reading The Deep Blue Sea by Terence Rattigan. Oh my god, I've been reading this play since October, and I saw this play twice in Cineplex as staged by National Theatre with Helen McCrory and Tom Burke in it. Loved the play, couldn't wait to read the actual script, and finally finished it right now. It has nothing to do with the play itself. I was just in a very big slump and I wanted to enjoy it. This is a very dramatic play about a woman who finds herself sort of trapped in the situation. She left her husband. She is living with her lover, whom she loves obsessively, and this love is so encompassing that it basically takes over her life. But unfortunately, this guy even though he might love her, he doesn't love her in the same way or with the same intensity. And with being like hopeless that she is, she decides to commit suicide. So the play starts with an actual suicide attempt, and then how the things start evolving. And it is a very powerful play. It is quoted to be one of the greatest female roles to be written. So it's a very dramatic and a very hard role to play, because emotions are so intense and it's written beautifully. I really enjoyed the script itself, because sometimes when you read a script or a play, you just feel as if it's bare bones, and the producer is, or any producer is just given this basic concept where they have to, you know, evolve it and turn it into an actual play when it comes to directing and producing a play on stage. So in this case, it was written really beautifully. I had never had a problem envisioning what was happening. I could always see the actual action. I mean, obviously I saw the play before I finished reading this one, but still, it was so well written that I really, really enjoyed it. And it is set in 1940s, 1950s, and both main protagonists are a bit lost. The woman who is so lost in her love that she doesn't know what to do else in her life, and Freddie, the guy whom she loves, is also a bit lost because he used to be a well-acclaimed pilot during war, but now the war is over and he's not really needed, and his identity as a pilot is also disintegrating in a way, and he's lost in drinking. And he's also not being able to cope with the fact that she loves him so much that she's been driven to suicide. There's a lot of layers to the story. Obviously, it deals with passion. Mental health is a huge part of this play, obviously, because the main protagonist, Hester, suffers from depression, and it is quite beautifully written. I gave this play like 4.5 stars, basically 5 stars. I can give it 5 stars easily, to be honest. And as you can see, I used a lot of tabs because I just couldn't help it. There are so many beautiful quotes and so many beautiful things. It's witty, it's very funny in some ways, and it's also very heartbreaking. This play also has one of the best endings ever, because it is such an open ending where you cannot really tell what is going to happen next. So it can go all and just turn for the worse, or it can turn for the best. And I love it because the audience is basically given a chance to make up their own mind about what is going to happen next. I personally think that the things are going to go for better for Hester, but yeah. So yeah, 4.5 stars, 5 stars. Next, I read Hedda Gabler by Henrik Ibsen, and I have not read other plays in this book. There is also A Doll's House, Ghosts, and The Master Builder, but I only read Hedda Gabler because I also went to see it at Cineplex as broadcasted by National Theatre Live this past Thursday, and I wanted to finish reading this play before I actually go and see the play, so I did it, and I was so happy that I did it. Amazing. So I'm going to talk about this play in more detail in a separate video about theater and plays that I've seen recently, but I just want to say that Hedda Gabler is a very interesting play. First of all, it's written by a Norwegian writer in the 19th century, so it is in many ways way ahead of its time. It's a very feminist play in some ways, as the main protagonist, Hedda Gabler, is a woman with such a strong character and such a strong will and such a brilliant mind that she manages to manipulate people around herself. She's obviously a very dominant figure, and in many ways she's trying to behave like a man. And I'm not talking about pretending to be a man. I'm just saying that the things that she does were not common or possible for women in the 19th century. That's why she is in many ways ahead of her time, because she was trying to be on the same level as her husband. But obviously she was trapped in the society, and she could not realize her full potential, and that is the tragedy of this play and of her character. So I really enjoyed this play, not because of the language mostly, but mostly because of the character. It's very character driven. Hedda Gabler is amazing. At some point while reading this, just the way she manipulates people to commit all sorts of things, I even started thinking that she might be a psychopath, just because the way she felt no remorse towards people, either men or women, was just so strange. However, it's not about that. Maybe in some ways it is about mental health, but mostly it's just about a woman who has a lot of potential and who's striving to be on the same level as her husband, or just on the same level as men, but she's not able to because of the society, because it's 19th century. I love this play. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm so happy that I got to actually read the play before watching it on stage, because it was very different the way it was staged. I'm going to talk about Hedda Gabler separately in my theater chat video, because there is a lot I can say about this play, this text, versus what was put on stage by National Theatre. And I really want to discuss it because it was just kind of like 2 different types of Hedda Gabler. But yeah, this play is very interesting. It's definitely feminist in nature. It's definitely about a very strong woman who is trapped, and by the end of it, it unfortunately does not end very happily. Rather, not happily at all. And but still, it's a classic, and if you want to read something which is very gripping, and there are definitely a lot of moments while I was reading the play when I was so surprised, because it was like I could not really see that happening in the 19th century. It's just so beyond what was normal for that society. I hope to read more Ibsen soon, because I really enjoyed Hedda Gabler more than I expected that I would, and I really want to read A Doll's House now, because it seems to be pretty much about the same thing, like a woman trapped in the society in the 19th century. So yeah, 4 stars. Next, I read this urban fantasy novella, The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. This is a story about a young black man named Tom, who is a hustler and a bit of a con man. He plays a bit of music, like jazz music, and basically does all he can do to earn money and provide for himself and his disabled father. He also does small deliveries for certain people, and one of those deliveries happens to be a book, not just a regular book, but a magical book, the book that Tom feels that there is something about this book. He recognizes it for what it's worth, and when he delivers this book to a woman in Queens, he feels that it's not safe to give this book to this woman, so he tears out the last page from this book, basically rendering it useless. Because of that, a series of events unfold, and I quite liked the premise of this book. This book is set in New York in 1920s, 1930s, when jazz music is on the rise, when black and white people are still sort of segregated, and there is a lot of violence in this book towards black people, so just please be aware of that. There is a lot of racial slurs as well. A lot of things that happen in this book do not really sit well with me, but it's an urban fantasy. I like the fact that it was urban fantasy, and it was quite an interesting setting, because I've never read a book which would be set in like New York, especially in those times, and I love the fact that the main protagonist was also black, and he was very, you know, forward about everything that was happening to him and his father, and how his father suffered and how his mother suffered, etc, etc, etc. However, certain things did not really make sense in this book. The series of events were a bit confusing. I felt that it was difficult for me to really feel for the characters beyond what I said before. Neither Tom nor anyone in the story, perhaps with exception of his father, were very likable. I didn't really like the characters in the story. I didn't like what was happening. There was a lot of gore and there was a lot of violence, and even though I like the idea of mystic books and some other things that were happening, and alphabet and just like a bit of urban magic, I really enjoyed that. However, the ending was kind of weird as well. It was not properly explained what was book supposed to do, and what it was, or what would have happened if that spell was concluded. It just, there was some part of the book that I read it and I was like, I don't really get it. I don't really understand if that was intention or not. And because of that, and also the fact that I kind of enjoyed the book and I liked the premise, like I said, and I really liked the idea of this urban fantasy set in that period of time, but at the same time there were some things that did not really sit well with me. That's why I gave this book only 3 stars. Nevertheless, if you're a fan of urban fantasy, I encourage you to go and try this one out. It's very short, it's just a novella, and 150 pages. You can read it in a couple of hours, and it's definitely interesting because of its premise and how the magic is described and what is happening in there. And I did enjoy the fact that there is a historical background to the story, as well as the New York is described vividly. The author himself is a person of color and he is native to New York City as well. So I really enjoyed this book. However, like I said, I cannot really give it more than 3 stars because this is something that I enjoy for the fact that I read it. It was different. I enjoyed it, but it was not something that gripped me or something that would make me read this book again. However, there is one sentence that I marked. Nobody ever thinks of himself as a villain, does he? Even monsters hold high opinions of themselves. Yeah, that was a moment that I really enjoyed in the book, so I'm going to write it down. Also, please be aware that there is a lot of racial slurs as well as violence towards black people and just people of color generally, as well as a lot of gore and blood in this book. So if it's not your thing, maybe you should skip it. However, otherwise, I do encourage you to read it. And the last but definitely not least was the audiobook that I finished listening this past week, and that was The King of Average by Gary Schwartz. I was actually provided a free copy of this audiobook by the author's publicist in the exchange of a free and honest review, and I'm going to publish a separate video review of this audiobook. I'm just waiting to confirm with the publicist when they want this review to go live. But otherwise, I just want to say that I was so pleasantly surprised because this is a debut novel by Gary Schwartz, and I'm just going to give you a brief summary of the book. This is a middle grade fantasy novel about a boy named James who's an average kid. He gets average grades at school. He doesn't have that many friends. He's not peculiar or particular or good at anything. His mother neglects him, and he feels kind of low. And one day he decides that the only thing that he can be very good at is being average. And at that point, once he makes this decision, there is a little bird who brings him to a different land. And that is the land of average. This is a very interesting story. The boy finds himself in a different world, full of different characters, where he wants to become the king of average. But to be the king of average, he has to go on a quest and do some things, accomplish some things. And I'm so glad that I picked because I had an option to pick between ebook and audiobook, and I picked audiobook because audiobook is performed by Gary Schwartz himself, who is, by the way, a voice actor, and he does such an amazing job. I was completely blown away. Honestly, I cannot wait to do a full review of this book because it was so good and I enjoyed it so much. I gave the book itself overall of 4 stars because there were some small things that I still think could have been dealt with better, especially in the ending, but overall the book was fantastic. It was just the plot itself, 4 stars, and performance of the book itself is just clear 5 stars. I will definitely try to post my review as soon as possible. I just need to confirm with the publicist when it can go live. But yeah, I do not really luck out when it comes to ARCs or advanced copies or copies for reviews. I usually get, unfortunately, I get books which are not very good, and I usually am very critical when it comes to books, especially by indie authors or by new time authors like debut novels, and this one was just such a treat, and it was so, everyone was so lovable and everything in that story made perfect sense that I would be quite happy to listen to this audiobook again, quite honestly. This is it. This is all I read in a week between March 5th and March 11th. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!